The power of Stoic silence, the ultimate guide to mind control. We live in an era that is strangely addicted to noise. We have been sold the false idea that the person who shouts the loudest, who responds the fastest, or who always demands to have the last word, is the strongest or the most successful. We are bombarded with the notion that we must have an opinion on every news story, react to every provocation on social media, and fill every single second of our lives with visual or auditory stimuli. But the reality of human nature is completely the opposite. Anyone who does not know how to be silent, who reacts immediately to any external stimulus, is simply a puppet. They are a slave to other people's opinions, daily unexpected events, and their own uncontrolled emotions. Zeno of Citium, the wise philosopher who founded the school of Stoicism in ancient Greece, used to repeat a great truth to his students: "It is better to trip with the feet than with the tongue." Wounds to the body heal, but words spoken without thinking can destroy empires, reputations, and relationships in the blink of an eye. Chosen, conscious silence is not cowardice. It has absolutely nothing to do with shyness, submission, or weakness. Quite the contrary. Silence is an active force, an unbreakable mental shield, and one of the greatest demonstrations of power, dignity, and intelligence that a human being can possess. When you choose to be silent, you regain control of the time and the situation. Throughout this deep journey, you are going to discover the exact 8 moments when closing your mouth will give you an absolute strategic advantage in your personal, professional, and emotional life. We will analyze the teachings of the 3 great giants of Stoicism: Emperor Marcus Aurelius, the emancipated slave Epictetus, and the brilliant advisor Seneca. Pay close attention to each section and to the practical exercises included in this guide, because applying the art of silence will completely change how the world perceives you, and, most importantly, how you perceive yourself. Moment number 1. When the criticism you receive is unfair or malicious. Imagine the scene. You give 100% of your capacity to a professional project. You spend sleepless nights taking care of the details, or you do your best to maintain harmony in your home. Suddenly, someone in authority or an envious coworker attacks your effort in a disproportionate way, using lies or completely biased arguments. In that split second, your ego is going to jump like a wounded animal. Your biology is going to scream at you to defend yourself, to raise your voice, to prove that the other person is wrong, or to pay them back in the same coin by attacking their flaws. Do not do it. That is the exact moment when Stoicism becomes a superpower. The Stoic Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who ruled the Roman Empire while dealing with betrayals, wars, and plagues, explained in his personal journals that pain never comes from the actions or words of others, but from the importance and estimation you decide to give them in your own mind. You have the power to revoke that judgment at any time. When you face destructive criticism, your first and most powerful line of defense is absolute silence. Do not give away your vital energy to someone who is only looking to destabilize you. Making a pause and staying silent in the face of an injustice generates an immediate psychological effect. It completely disorients the attacker because they expect you to get upset, they expect you to cry or shout, thereby validating their aggression. Your silence hits them right back like a frozen mirror. During that space of stillness, process the information in a purely logical way, free of emotions. Ask yourself these questions mentally. Is there at least 1% of useful truth in this attack that I can use to improve my character or my work? If the answer is yes, keep that small lesson and use it to your advantage. If the answer is no, if the criticism stems purely from the other person's frustration, envy, or ignorance, throw it away as if it were garbage. Do not let it cross the border of your mind. At the end of the day, you do not need to waste your energy giving defensive speeches. Let the constant excellence of your results, the cleanliness of your actions, and the firmness of your character silently humiliate your critics. Anyone who justifies themselves too much in the face of injustice, in the eyes of Stoicism, weakens and loses their dignity. Moment number 2. Faced with the mud of rumors, gossip, and defamation. Human beings are social animals, and one of the darkest dynamics of society is gossip. Rumors are like dry leaves scattered by a strong wind. If you try to run after each one to catch it, and deny it, you will end up exhausted, ridiculous, and you will have achieved nothing. When you find out that people are inventing false stories about your private life, your finances, or your behavior behind your back, your neurotic impulse pushes you to run and clarify the situation, demand explanations, and clear your name in front of everyone. That is a serious strategic mistake. Trying to give explanations to a mass of people who have already decided to judge you, or to a deformer who enjoys doing harm, is like trying to put out a forest fire by throwing buckets of gasoline on it. The philosopher Epictetus, who spent a large part of his life as a slave before becoming one of the most respected masters in Rome, left a golden rule for these situations. He said that if you find out someone is speaking badly of you, do not try to defend yourself or deny the stories. Instead, smile and say, "It is obvious that this person does not know all my other flaws, because if they did, they would not have mentioned only those." This attitude is not an immature mockery, it is a deep understanding of human psychology. By refusing to participate in the game of rumors, by maintaining an unbreakable silence and not showing the slightest alteration, you remove the only fuel that gossip needs to survive, your attention and your suffering. A rumor dies of starvation when the victim acts as if it does not exist. Silence in the face of defamation completely wears down the liar, exposing them to others as someone obsessed with the person, who clearly does not care what they say about them. Concentrate exclusively on what is under your direct control, your daily actions, your integrity, and your tranquility. Let the world say whatever it wants. Time is the most relentless judge that exists, and always, sooner or later, it ends up bringing the truth to the surface and putting every liar in their place. Moment number 3. In the midst of the destructive storm of anger. Anger is, without a doubt, the most dangerous emotion for the well-being of a human being and those around them. Modern psychologists call it an amygdala hijack, a state in which the rational part of the brain completely shuts down and the most primitive instinct takes control. The Stoics described it as a temporary madness. When anger takes over you, because someone made a serious mistake, because they insulted you, or because things went disastrously wrong, your tongue becomes an extremely sharp dagger. A single hurtful sentence, spoken with fury in a 5-second outburst, has the destructive power to obliterate a relationship with a partner, a friendship, or a business opportunity that took you 5 or 10 years to build. Words cannot be erased. Once they leave your mouth, the damage is done forever. Marcus Aurelius wrote a reflection in his Meditations that we should all remember every morning when we wake up. How much more serious are the consequences of anger than the causes that provoked it? If you think about it carefully, almost always the original problem that made you angry is small, compared to the chaos, pain, and regret you cause with your furious reaction. Therefore, when you feel that characteristic heat rising up your chest, when you notice your blood boiling, and attack words crowding your throat, force yourself to keep absolute and immediate silence. Do not speak, do not respond, do not send that text message, do not post that comment on social media. This deliberate pause does not mean at all that you are being a coward, or that you are unhealthily repressing your emotions. It means you are smart enough and strong enough to freeze the situation. Silence gives you the necessary time for the chemical storm in your brain to calm down, allowing reason to take the wheel again. Breathe deeply and analyze the situation coldly. In any human interaction, in any discussion or conflict, the person who gets upset first, the one who shouts, the one who loses control, is the one who loses control of the game and their own life. The one who remains in silence, observing calmly, retains absolute power. To master anger through Stoic silence, it is useful to follow a very clear 3-step process. The first step is physical recognition. Learn to detect the symptoms of rage before they speak for you, such as tension in your jaw or a racing heart. The second step is the verbal veto. Establish the unbreakable rule that you will never speak while those symptoms are active. The third step is the deconstruction of the stimulus. Once silence has restored your calm, ask yourself if what made you angry will have any importance 5 years from now. In the vast majority of cases, the answer will be a resounding no. By practicing this, you transform the destructive energy of anger into a quiet, balanced strength. Moment number 4. When you find yourself in the presence of a braggart or an egocentric person, it is practically impossible to live in today's society without constantly crossing paths with vanity. Whether at a family dinner, a business meeting, or a social event, there is always someone who takes the microphone of the conversation to start bragging excessively. They will tell you how much they earn, the brand of their new car, their luxurious trips, their connections with important people, or how perfect their children are. They do it with a loud energy, desperately seeking validation, envy, or applause from their surroundings. Social conditioning and our own repressed ego push us to enter into that absurd competition. We feel the urge to interrupt and say things like, "Well, I just bought something better," or "I was also offered a higher position at another company." Do not fall into that pathetic trap of clashing egos. Stoicism invites us to observe these situations with a mixture of compassion and philosophical distance. When you find yourself before a braggart, the best strategic move is to listen carefully, nod subtly with a slight smile, and maintain absolute silence. Do not try to outperform them. Do not try to correct them, and do not try to prove to them that you have more. Your tranquility and your refusal to compete demonstrate a self-confidence so solid, so mature, and so well structured that it does not need the applause or approval of any stranger to feel valuable. Seneca, the great philosopher and statesman who accumulated a vast fortune, but always kept his mind detached from luxuries, explained that true greatness does not need to show itself with noise or ornaments, because it shines on its own. While others waste their vital energy competing for crumbs of attention and external validation, you use your silence to conserve your energy and focus it on your true goals, your virtues, and the people who really matter in your life. Letting the other person speak and drown in their own ego allows you to study their character without revealing absolutely anything about yours. Silence makes you the intelligent observer of the human comedy. Moment number 5. Faced with aggressive ignorance and sterile arguments. One of the greatest drains on energy and mental health in the modern world is trying to argue with someone who thinks they know everything, but in reality knows absolutely nothing. We live in the era of instant experts, people who read a headline on the internet and assume they have the moral and intellectual authority to debate with professionals who have spent decades studying a topic. Trying to convince an obstinate ignorant using logical arguments, scientific data, or real statistics is one of the most sterile and frustrating tasks you can undertake. It is the philosophical equivalent of trying to play chess with a pigeon. No matter how good you are, the pigeon is going to knock over the pieces, crap on the board, and fly into the air celebrating as if it had won the game. Think of the historical example of the great astronomer and physicist Galileo Galilei. He discovered and defended with mathematical proof the truth of heliocentrism, the reality that the Earth revolves around the Sun. However, he faced the aggressive ignorance of an entire ecclesiastical and political institution that refused to look through the telescope because they preferred to keep their dogmas intact. Although he was tried, threatened, and sentenced to life under house arrest, Galileo understood at many moments that shouting with blind fanatics would not change reality. He kept a strategic silence in the courts, knowing perfectly well that the truth of the universe did not need loud debates to remain real. It would stand alone by its own weight over the passing centuries, as it actually did. When you encounter a closed-minded person in your day-to-day life, whether in your office, in your group of friends, or in the comment sections of the internet, learn to choose your battles carefully. Your time on this earth is limited and extremely precious. Your peace of mind is a treasure that you must protect with all your might. Do not waste them trying to educate someone who has made the conscious decision to remain in ignorance to protect their fragile identity. Do not try to have the last word in political, religious, or sports debates that lead nowhere. When you notice that the conversation is entering that absurd loop, apply Stoic silence. Disconnect mentally, nod politely to end the interaction, and walk away. Your silence is not a surrender. It is the recognition that your intellect is above cheap provocations. Moment number 6. When you face a profound injustice or a tragic blow of fate. Life is not a bed of roses, and Stoicism has never been a philosophy of naive optimism. Sooner or later, existence hits us with deeply unfair situations, a sudden dismissal from a company to which you gave years of loyalty, a financial scam by someone you trusted, or an unexpected health problem that breaks all your plans for the future. Faced with these scenarios, the reaction of most people is loud lamentation. They cry to anyone who will listen, curse their luck, blame the government, the economy, or the universe, and sink into a role of helpless victims. However, complaining, shouting, or looking for culprits does not have the power to change external facts or turn back the clock. The only thing lamenting achieves is to weaken your mind and cloud your ability to find solutions. Think of the impressive historical figure of Nelson Mandela. He was captured and sentenced to spend decades of his youth locked in a tiny cell on Robben Island, the victim of a deeply unjust and cruel segregationist regime. Mandela could have spent those years shouting at the guards, consuming himself in a blind, sterile, and noisy hatred that would probably have ended his life. Instead, he chose the path of Stoic silence. He used the forced isolation and the stillness of his cell to temper his character, study the minds of his oppressors, devour history books, and cultivate an absolutely indestructible mental resilience. When he finally emerged from that prison, he did not seek noisy revenge or punishment. He used his quiet wisdom to unite an entire country that was on the verge of a bloody civil war. When life presents you with an injustice or a tragic setback, adopt this majestic posture. Do not throw a tantrum like a small child whose toy has been taken away. Keep a dignified and deep silence. Allow that silence to act as a mental laboratory, where you will keep your mind cool and your heart tempered. Instead of wasting your breath asking yourself, "Why is this happening to me?" use silence to analyze the situation with surgical precision and ask yourself, "What can I do now with what has happened?" Stoic silence is not a passive acceptance of suffering. It is the secret preparation phase for the most intelligent, strategic, and forceful action of your life. It is the calm before rebuilding your empire. To navigate injustices with the grace of the great masters, the Stoics developed a series of specific mental exercises that rely directly on silence. The first is the dichotomy of control, popularized by Epictetus. Every time something unjust happens to you, sit in absolute silence and divide the situation into two clear mental columns. In the first column, place the things that do not depend on you, such as the decisions of your bosses, economic crises, or the actions of other people. In the second column, place the only thing that does depend on you, which is your response, your focus, and your next actions. The exercise consists of using silence to emotionally disconnect from the first column and pour all your intelligence into the second. In this way, injustice ceases to be a tragedy and is transformed into a logistical problem that you are ready to solve. Moment number 7. In the inevitable moments of loss, emptiness, and grief. Death and loss are the only absolute certainties that all human beings share from the moment we are born. Sooner or later, we will all have to say goodbye to a great life project, see the end of a beautiful stage, or face the most heart-wrenching pain of all, the death of a parent, a partner, a friend, or a child. When loss occurs, an immense void is generated around us that manifests as a cold, heavy, and terrifying silence. The automatic reaction of modern society to this void is to run away from it. People try to cover the pain of grief immediately using noise. They sink into work obsessively, go out partying, consume alcohol, over-medicate, or fill their hours with cheap entertainment on screens so they do not have to be alone with their thoughts. But trying to flee from pain only manages to postpone it and entrench it deep in the subconscious, transforming it over the years into chronic anxiety or depression. The Stoics teach us that the only path to true healing is to cross the bridge of pain with your eyes wide open. The famous author C.S. Lewis, after losing his wife to a terminal illness, wrote a phrase of immense depth in his grief journal: "The pain I feel now is, exactly, the happiness I had before." That is the price we pay for having loved, and it is a price worth paying.
When it is your turn to cross the dark night of a loss, do not seek refuge in noise or distractions. Embrace that silence that life has imposed on you. Stay alone in your room, allow the tears to flow freely without judging yourself or labeling yourself as weak, because the Stoics were not men of stone without feelings, they were humans who felt deeply but mastered their response. Use that reflective silence to write your thoughts in a notebook, to remember shared moments with gratitude, and to accept the impermanence of all things in the world. Silence in the midst of grief is the only sacred space, the only spiritual wound where the human soul can lick its wounds, process sadness, and slowly rebuild itself to keep walking with honor. Moment number 8. When you are insulted or offended directly to your face. We have arrived at the final point, the scenario that tests the true value of any philosophy of life. You are on the street, in your work environment, or in a family argument, and someone approaches you with a distorted face, raising their voice and hurling a direct insult at your person with the sole intention of humiliating you, hurting your pride, and making you bow your head. The normal evolutionary response is symmetric defense. Responding with a stronger insult, raising your fists higher, or seeking physical harm. However, the philosopher Epictetus left the golden rule engraved in fire that completely dismantles this violent dynamic. He said, if someone manages to provoke you, realize that your own mind is an accomplice in the provocation. Analyze it coldly. An insult is like a package that someone brings and wants to deliver into your hands. If you get angry, if you shout, if you respond with rage, you are opening the package, accepting the gift, and allowing the other person's venom to enter your circulatory system. But if you maintain absolute silence, if you look the attacker directly in the eyes with an imperturbable calm, as if you were watching it rain, the package still belongs solely and exclusively to the person who brought it. The venom stays inside their own body, consuming them. Think of the great spiritual and political leaders of history, such as the community led by Mahatma Gandhi in their fight against a colonial empire armed to the teeth. They implemented the concept of peaceful resistance and absolute silence in the face of verbal and even physical aggression from police forces. That silence did not stem from submission, but from a moral superiority so gigantic, so evident, and so crushing that it ended up completely dismantling the psychology of the soldiers, who did not know how to react to men and women who did not return blows or shouts. When someone tries to insult you to lower you to the level of their own emotional misery, look them straight in the eye, keep a deathly silence, and maintain your upright posture. That silence is an invisible slap of dignity that will completely destroy the attacker's strat. E.g., leaving them exposed before everyone in their own ridiculousness and lack of mind control. You remain like a rock in the middle of the ocean, motionless before the battering of the foolish waves. To permanently integrate this eighth point into your psychological structure, it is fundamental to understand an advanced concept of Stoicism known as the devaluation of the offender. When someone hurls an insult at you, use that instant of mandatory silence to analyze the source of the offense. Ask yourself, what is the moral, intellectual, and emotional quality of the person who is shouting at me? If you discover that it is someone trapped in ignorance, frustration, or unhappiness, you will immediately understand that their insult does not speak about you, but about their own internal wounds. You cannot get angry with a dog that barks in the street, because it is in its nature to bark. In the same way, you cannot get angry with a wounded person who tries to wound others. Your stoic silence is then transformed into an act of high mental diplomacy. You grant the other person the right to be wrong while you keep your inner kingdom intact. Another fundamental tool used by ancient masters like Seneca is the nightly examination of conscience. At the end of each day, before closing your eyes to sleep, review your interactions of the day in absolute silence and take an honest balance of your words. Ask yourself, did I speak today out of mere ego in some meeting? Did I respond too quickly or sharply to a comment from my partner or a coworker? Did I manage to maintain silence in the face of braggart behavior or unfair criticism? Do not judge yourself with cruelty if you discover that you failed at certain moments. Stoicism does not seek mystical perfection, but constant progress. By taking note of your verbal stumbles, you reprogram your subconscious mind so that the next time you find yourself in a similar situation, the brake of silence will activate automatically before your tongue causes irreparable damage. The Emperor Marcus Aurelius summarized it in a brilliantly direct way in one of the most famous passages of his campaign writings: waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. B1. Stop wasting your precious saliva trying to convince the world of your virtues, your capacities, or your intentions through loud and empty speeches. Let your daily actions, the cleanliness of your decisions, the firmness of your character in the face of adversity, and the respect you show toward yourself be the ones that speak for you with a deafening volume. Stop reacting automatically and predictably as if you were a puppet pulled by the strings of every stimulus, every insult, or every unexpected event that the outside world throws at you daily. From this precise moment, make the conscious decision to think very carefully before opening your mouth. Fully master your tongue, learn to take refuge in the wisdom of chosen silence, and you will begin to notice how you transform into the absolute master of your own mind, your destiny, and your life. If this deep and detailed message has helped you understand silence from a completely new and transformative perspective, I invite you to like this video to support the spread of classical philosophy. Subscribe to the channel by activating the notification bell to make sure you receive the next detailed lessons on Stoic wisdom and personal growth. Please take a moment right now to reflect and leave your opinion below in the comments section answering this question. Which of these 8 specific moments is the hardest for you to control in your daily life, and how are you going to apply silence starting tomorrow to master it? I will love to read your experiences and your reflections. Stay firm, stay calm, and see you in the next lesson of Stoic growth.